to the Web3 Prof Podcast.
All right, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Arsh Molu, who is head of operations for the Human Rights Foundation. Thanks for being with me here today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just jump straight in. Arsh, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your story of how you got into Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I got into Bitcoin actually in high school. I was really interested in the aspects of money and kind of like the social landscape of like how we interact with each other using money. And then, I just stumbled across the crypto market and Bitcoin, and at the time there was all these different things. Like it was really popping off. This was like 2019, 2020. So I was involved for different reasons, but I had gotten this sort of inkling for the crypto market and Bitcoin. I was like, okay, let's see what this is about, offline, right? So it was like a lot of Twitter, reading the books and listening to the podcasts, etc. And then, I kind of made my way to some different events. And what I saw was a lot of, people were previously telling me that this was, a community with a lot of younger people, right? Like, so as, a 17, 18-year-old, I was like, okay, like, I should be finding some other, teenagers, young 20, some people to kind of interact with. I went to my first event in 2021, and that wasn't the case, right?
Just old guys.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a mix of really great people, great thinkers, but I was really looking forward to meeting other like-minded people around my age.
Mm-hmm.
And when I didn't see that existed, there was actually one or two other people that I somehow found on Twitter, and they were also at the event. So that was enough for us to come together and be like, okay, we need to start something because we know that there's people out there. They just might not be on Twitter or, be able to find them their way to a conference, right? Because attending a conference is, hard, like because we were skipping school to do it right at the time. Right. So like, it's hard to just, skip school and like, the financial aspects, logistical aspects. But we wanted to start an online community. So that was the start of Generation Bitcoin that I co-founded with two other people. And the idea was just to, host weekly online meetups, or, whenever there's a conference in the summer, host something there. Just so there's like this kind of reaffirmation of a community with younger people, and so that people have something to get behind. So that was sort of the start of it. And then we, at this point I knew that, I really wanted to be involved in this. COVID was around the corner. And I was just looking for ways to get more involved. And in 2021, we had gotten invited to the MIT Bitcoin Expo to speak on the organization, and, just share some insights on that. And that's where I met someone from the Human Rights Foundation, and sort of the rest was history, because I wanted a way to be more involved on this level, because, I couldn't code, or I didn't have a lot of technical skills, but I did know how to run operations, and sort of, promote things, right? So
That's great. So tell us a little bit about the Human Rights Foundation.
Yeah. So the Human Rights Foundation is a nonprofit organization that was started right around 20 years ago now. And our founder, Thor Halvorsen, he is a Venezuelan activist, and his mother was actually shot during a protest in Venezuela. And what he had noticed, after going and campaigning about this, was that there was not a single organization focused on solely promoting and protecting human rights in authoritarian regimes. A lot of your, household names in humanitarian organizations, say Amnesty or Human Rights Watch. These organizations do great work, but they're mostly focused on the West, and they kind of touch the whole world, whereas we are solely focused on the about 70% of people who live under an authoritarian regime. So just from the start, right, we were always looking at technology and how VPNs and the free internet movement had an impact on activism. So it was just natural that we then found Bitcoin right around 10 or so years ago now, and we've really been using it and championing it, especially over the course of the past 7 or 8 years now.
So when we look at, you said 70% of people in this world live under authoritarian regimes. I mean, that's a shocking stat.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I think most of us don't realize like how significant that is.
Right.
So can you maybe just talk about like, what is an authoritarian regime?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of countries are we talking about here?
Yeah. So our basically methodology that we use, like we look at, our property rights, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and there's tons of different metrics that we look at when doing these classifications. So that 70% number contains fully authoritarian regimes, places like China or Russia or Venezuela, and then you have your hybrid authoritarian regimes, places like India, and so on. So we're looking at these places and basically creating a map around this. Like we have this thing called the tyranny tracker, and it's basically just to raise awareness around what's happening in the world, because a lot of people, especially in Canada where we are now, and North America and Europe, may not fully realize that most people around the world don't have the same privileges and rights that others have, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but I think Bitcoin really exacerbates that, and that's the portion that we're really focused on, because we do think that Bitcoin can challenge authoritarianism.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. How can Bitcoin challenge authoritarianism? Yeah,
so really what you're looking at here is an open, neutral currency, right? So there's this idea that, and now it's become more of a practice, right? So when we started incorporating this topic into some of our events and talking to activists about it back in 2017 or so, there were some cases that we had looked at, but today it's pretty clear that people, activists and nonprofits all around the world are actually using this thing. So what's happening is, in the recent years, you've had, different disasters all around the world. Like you had, the invasion of Ukraine, and you had, the recent genocide in Gaza, and in all these places, you do find light with Bitcoin. And even in protests, right? Like protests around Russia and Nicaragua, and dozens of countries in the past few years, we have seen the rise of Bitcoin, simply because if you're an activist on the front line, or if you're a opposition group, right, and you're trying to protest, the first thing an authoritarian regime will do is cut off your bank account. They won't arrest you, they'll arrest your bank account.
Right.
That's the more effective way, because then you really can't do things, especially if you're in a cashless society, and things are increasingly more digital, as we're seeing now. So then it's pretty easy just to put you on a halt, right? Because then you can't pay for materials, you can't pay for your website, you can't buy simple things. So we've been seeing a lot of activists turn to Bitcoin, and the regime just simply can't stop it if you're doing it effectively, right? And what does that really mean, doing it effectively? You could be using some centralized exchange, or you could be, self-custodying your Bitcoin and using it privately, which is what a large part of our program does, is actually goes in person and online to different groups and individuals and teaches them how to use Bitcoin to resist authoritarianism.
I mean, that's pretty powerful. I think that most people in Western countries believe that authoritarianism and dictatorships are generally bad for society.
Yeah.
And that freedom is really important. And these principles, I think, people on both the left and the right often value.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin is often communicated as kind of like a libertarian, right-wing concept, or it often aligns with right-wing ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're explaining is really kind of often a left-leaning or more liberal perspective,
Yeah.
especially in fighting for human rights. And I hate it when Bitcoin gets politicized. And I think it's great when we see kind of both sides of the table understanding the value of Bitcoin. So from a political perspective, is what I'm describing correct?
I would say so. I think the politicization of Bitcoin is, I think a net negative. But when you have an asset this large, when you have a movement this large, like, these things are going to happen, right? Like, anything you can think of will be tested and will happen. And we have had a lot of people coming to us and saying, hey, like, this is Republican coin, like,
right.
how dare you guys use this? We've kind of, the previous argument was, how could you this waste so much energy?
Right.
This uses a whole country's energy, and
right.
there's so many problems there. But recently it's become like, I don't, they're like, oh, I don't know, like, the Trump admin uses it, and I'm not sure how to feel about this, just because how the media has portrayed it. But I think you hit it right on the nail. It's really this thing where this idea where no matter who you are, where you are, you could use this. Like, it's an open tool. It's apolitical, right?
Yeah.
So I think just pushing that message really helps a lot. Because say you're on the ground, right, and you, like, really need to use this thing to save your life, then politics be damned.
You don't care, right?
Yeah, it's just like, who cares? This thing's actually working. Put the politics to the side. Put your money where your mouth is, and let's go. Like, this, we've had so many use cases, from people escaping countries to funneling Bitcoin into rallies in Venezuela, or funding underground schools in Afghanistan for girls, where now it's been almost 4 years where the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan, and girls can't learn anymore. And there's just so many different cases of this now, to where it can't really be dismissed. Like, it's just silly to dismiss it in 2025.
That's powerful. I mean, you're an American from the South.
Yeah.
And so, when you have to address things like, well, Trump, this is like a Trump thing, and it's kind of sad that you have to kind of defend it from that perspective, because when you make the argument to say, well, sure, believe what you want, but at the end of the day, Bitcoin is helping girls learn in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's pretty powerful in and of its own. In a society in which women can't participate in the economy, or drive cars, or walk on the streets without their husbands or brothers, they cannot participate in any meaningful way in the economy, and they're treated simply as a piece of property.
Yeah, and that's just one example. There's
tell us what other examples, or do you have stories, or tell us?
Yeah, I mean, there's recently in the past year, Venezuela has been a very powerful one, because there's been another kind of false election with the Maduro regime,
right?
And I'm sure everyone has seen this on the news. Think back to the past year. It's like,
I think you might be surprised how few people probably have seen it on the news.
well, no, I mean, to be fair, it was I mean, this one really broke out. Maybe, you know, I'm seeing it more than others.
Sure.
But I'm sure a lot of people may be familiar with this or have seen this. But pretty much chaos broke out on the streets of Venezuela for many months, and it's still ongoing. And pretty much, you know, there's been some people on the ground who we've been working with, and even some Venezuelan activists who are in exile. But you know, we've been able to work with them, and you know, we started HRF has started a Venezuela Solidarity Fund, pretty much powered in Bitcoin. So we've been able to disperse a good amount of Bitcoin into the streets. So that's a very recent example. But then there's also people in Venezuela who we know. A great friend of ours, Mauricio, he was able to escape Venezuela by mining Bitcoin at home. This was probably 10, 12 years ago. But you know, going into more recent examples.
Wait. What do you mean? What do you mean he was able to escape by mining Bitcoin?
So, pretty much, you know, his story is actually pretty cool. Like him and his brother were able to, you know, mine Bitcoin at home when you know, this was 10, 12 years ago, so it was easier to do so, and it had become increasingly illegal to do this in Venezuela, and they were basically able to harness that Bitcoin and self-custody it. And once the, you know, regime found out they were mining Bitcoin, they were pretty much going to be chased out of the country.
Right.
So they were able to take the Bitcoin with them and escape, right? And you have so many cases, like, you know, just using this case of, like, you know, escaping a government, like in Ukraine, for example, or in Afghanistan. Like you know, escaping is one thing, right? But like having something with you,
right?
You know, because you can't take you can't take your house with you. You can't take, you know, a bunch of bars of gold or, you know, cash, right? Like if you get caught and get stripped, it's over, right? But if you can memorize, you know, 12 words, like that's pretty much all you need to start a new life, right?
Wow.
And so I'm fortunate to have now many friends who have had this firsthand example of being able to escape and take that with them.
So I understand that Human Rights Foundation has a Bitcoin development fund. So tell us a bit about that and how that's deployed. Yeah.
So when we were getting more and more involved in this, around, you know, 2017, 2018, we have our flagship event called the Oz the Freedom Forum, and we were doing some workshops and trainings there. But by mid-2020, it was pretty clear that this was something that we wanted to pursue. So like I said, put your money where your mouth is earlier. And that's sort of what we did here. So we received an original gift, you know, smaller size gift. And basically this donor was like, you guys should start looking at funding Bitcoin. And, you know, at first we're like, okay, like, you know, is this our role as a human rights organization? Because at the time, you know, the people who were funding Bitcoin were nonprofits solely focused on that. You have Brink, you have OpenSats, Spiral. So these are organizations focused on solely funding Bitcoin. But us as a human rights organization, we were like, okay, is this our place? But, you know, we got basically, we got granted permission to do it by our board and by the team. So we started at this first gift, and we knew we'd have to keep on raising. And sort of, you know, brick by brick, we were able to do quarterly grants. So maybe a couple people a quarter funding mainly tech-related projects. But as we've moved on the past few years, we sort of, you know, we still support core developers and tech-related projects, but we're really trying to focus more on translations and, you know, physical meetups and conferences and movements all around the world, because that's the way to bring Bitcoin to people, right? Is like funding their organizations and, you know, funding translations, because there's all this great Bitcoin material. Right?
Yeah.
Like we're about to go to learning Bitcoin this weekend, and we're going to see all these cool workshops and materials, right? But a large problem over the past few years has been, is this Bitcoin wallet or is this Bitcoin book available in Farsi or Mandarin or Urdu? So that's been a large part of what we've been able to do, and even funding things like Me Premier Bitcoin, which they've been instrumental in doing this. They've translated to dozens of languages. So now we have this like quarterly system where we grant about 20 projects, and we do about $1 million a quarter. And in total now we're nearing about 300 projects, and about $10 million supported to the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is
and
really cool.
Was the original donation that started this in Bitcoin?
Yeah, it was in Bitcoin. Our first grant was to Chris Belcher to work on CoinSwap. Okay. And the first few grants were to core developers, as I mentioned. So we really we receive a lot of our donations for the fund in Bitcoin, which makes sense.
Right.
And then, when we're dispersing it, we also disperse it in Bitcoin. We give people an option, but increasingly so, the answer is, I want the Bitcoin.
Okay. So some projects that I've read about, RoboSats, Bitshala, Flash. What are some standout projects that you guys have worked on that really stick out in your mind?
Yeah. So Sparrow Wallet is one. Sparrow Wallet is basically a wallet that you can have on your computer, and it's become very, very prominent with a lot of activists using this wallet, and mainly it's like your go-to developer wallet. Also, I'd say you mentioned RoboSats. That's one where you can pretty much it's like a Telegram bot where you can buy Bitcoin from.
Oh wow.
And same with like LNP2P bot, and basically finding like peer-to-peer ways for people to like use and buy and sell Bitcoin. Yeah. And then there's the Africa Bitcoin conference, which we we were involved in starting. And for Farida Naburema, she's like the convener of this event, and she's been in the HRF community for a long time, and she was able to learn about Bitcoin, and now she brings a she hosts like the regional event, which gathers the entire continent. So there's a lot of conferences that we've been able to support, technical projects, like I said, translations, etc. But there are a good bit that definitely stand out, and especially like regional, right? So like you have general Bitcoin education, but an organization like Bitshala, who is focusing on local translations and meetups, and funding in India.
Oh, in India.
So like we're really trying to like touch on those. So like there's Vintium in Brazil, there's Bitshala in India. And there's different ones all over the world that we're really interested in supporting.
Oh, that's fascinating. What can you tell me about the College Freedom Forum and financial freedom workshops?
The College Freedom Forum, yeah. So this is something that was started by the HRF team. I want to say we've been doing these for 10 years now, but it's like the idea of bringing, our Oslo Freedom Forum, which is this world-renowned human rights conference that's been going for 17 years.
Which happens in Oslo?
In Oslo, Norway, yeah. It's every summer, and we're going to be on year 18 next year. And, it's pretty much like, we bring the best voices from all over the world to share their stories and really open eyes about what their struggles were and what they've been through. And hearing these stories, it really plays a part, and we're like, okay, it motivates you, and it's like, how can I do more for this cause? So generally taking this idea now to students who may not be able to get to Norway right? Like, and personalizing these experiences for students has played a large role in, taking a group of activists, but now students are, their minds are racing. It's like, how can I, individuals who are studying foreign affairs and different things. It's like, how can I be more involved in this?
Well, that sounds incredible. Colleges, I teach at university, and unfortunately, colleges are not a source of freedom. They're in Western societies, right? There's a lot of, a limiting of people's beliefs, and it's challenging for a lot of students who don't maybe believe, especially in North America, of course, like liberal value systems, and so working with students is, I think, just so critically important for everyone to understand that, freedom of speech and freedom of expression and gathering and things like this are really important values that we all have, no matter what your belief system is, right? Yeah. And I think this is what's challenging sometimes, is that, sometimes we have to allow people to speak, even though we disagree with them, right? That's absolutely critical in any human rights situation. Just because we disagree does not believe that you shouldn't be allowed to share your opinions. When we look at kind of your path, you've also been involved in Bitcoin Students Network, or you're a co-founder of Bitcoin Students Network. So let's get a sense of what that is. Yeah.
So earlier I had mentioned the sort of starting point was with Generation Bitcoin, and that was sort of like your general community focus on all of Gen Z, right? So this can be anyone from middle schooler to mid-20s. But now, we about a year and a half ago, my co-founder Ella Huff and I, we started an organization called the Bitcoin Students Network to solely focus on universities, because a problem that we were seeing, and that Ella was first-handedly experiencing at Cornell, was that there was just so much, there's so many blockchain and crypto clubs. Pretty much every university has or had one. Maybe it dissolved because of leadership, etc. But the conversation is incredibly scattered around the topics, and really for us it was like we're okay coexisting with different things, because I know students are they may be more interested in blockchain applications or DAOs or different things, and that's great. But what we saw, and we went to go attend different university blockchain programs and stuff, it was like there was no talk about Bitcoin at all. And Ella and I, as passionate Gen Z Bitcoiners, we were like, okay, like we need to fix this. So under the Bitcoin Students Network, the kind of thesis is to provide a roadmap to different students at universities on how to start their club. You might need a constitution, advisors, X amount of funding, X amount of members to start. So like we kind of put it all together like this. And then Ella had started, Ella had left the Cornell blockchain club and started her own Bitcoin club. And like that was pretty much our guinea pig around a year and a half ago. And now the Bitcoin Students Network has expanded into 60 different countries, around 60 different countries.
Oh, wow.
And working with students at these universities. Because it's a lot, originally, like, the idea was to campaign to universities to adopt a Bitcoin major, which is a lot harder. We learned.
The bureaucracy.
Yeah. Actually, Ella was able to get her Bitcoin major approved at Cornell.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
But tons of work. And it was like, this is not scalable. Like, this won't work. How about we just go straight to the student and start this in like a grassroots way? So we were able to touch, now students from dozens of different countries who are leading their own Bitcoin clubs. So we definitely want to see more of that.
I love that. That's very cool. That's great. And I think that's just so important, because there are challenges in the student clubs that I support personally, where we see so many challenges with, like leadership changes, for example. Students who are not there for very long, and so they have to become a leader when they're 19 and be passing it over when they're 20 so that they can exit when they're 21 or whatever, and it's challenging sometimes for these types of things.
But even like the funding challenges, right? Because you have different prestigious universities in the U.S. that are funded heavily by crypto companies, right? Like multiple six figures of funding, to where it's never been an issue. Guess what? Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing department. Right?
So we've heard.
So what we've been talking to people about this, and they're like, look, I need 10 students to start a club. I only have 6 students right now. But in order to get the other 4 students, I have to do some marketing and print out some posters using my own money. Yeah. And I don't want to do that. Yeah. So then the idea just like goes away. Yeah. I'm like, printing posters and the lack of funding of such a trivial amount of money should not be a blocker for people starting a club. It's absolutely ridiculous, given that different blockchain and crypto clubs have a shit ton of funding. Yeah. It's just not ideal.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. All right, I kind of want to wrap things up here. Tell me, when we look at Human Rights Foundation, does Human Rights Foundation view the open source nature of Bitcoin as a form of speech or a form of resistance? It's a bit philosophical.
Yeah, I think we're generally on the code as speech idea, and not even just with Bitcoin, but like the power of open source. What Jack Dorsey talks about a lot, right? Is like, this doesn't necessarily have to do with just Bitcoin. We've been really pushing Nostr as well, which is a decentralized protocol with a lot of Bitcoin values, a lot of Bitcoin integration. But any open source protocol, we definitely value the code. We think it's just a beautiful process. Like, I personally think it's a really great process on like how code is validated. And I don't have any first, like I explained earlier, my code is pretty embarrassing. I do have an appreciation for that, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners as well like may not fully understand the work that goes behind maintaining and validating Bitcoin. But we think it's increasingly important for people to maintain this code so it can be as usable and as robust as possible.
Amazing. So looking ahead, what emerging challenges or opportunities do you anticipate at the crossroads of Bitcoin, of human rights, and of global education?
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting time, because like even this event this weekend, I'm looking forward to seeing how there's so many different educators now, and different organizations focus on Bitcoin education. Like, we didn't see much of this 5 years ago. Like, education was a big problem. And my personal view, like as I was looking at student education and even down my own road path, it was like read these huge books, and there wasn't a lot of Bitcoin content. Yeah. So I really think that as the years have gone on, and as the years will go on, we're gonna see some really cool Bitcoin education projects and individuals. And I think just like the passion, right? Like last night we got to meet some really cool educators and people who are just working to educate the masses. And I think the passion is at an all-time high. It definitely feels that way. Regarding the intersection of financial freedom and human rights, same thing there. Like we're definitely at the stage where as we've built out our education program within the Human Rights Foundation to educate different nonprofits, we've been able to get to hundreds of different NGOs and activists who otherwise, I think a few years ago would have had a different eye on this, right? So like now we have, Amnesty International coming to us, and the National Endowment for Democracy and very, very, very large humanitarian organizations basically saying, okay, like things are getting shaky.
That's incredible.
We need to use Bitcoin. And at that point, it's like, you kind of move the politics to the side. It's like, how can you actually get money into these places,
Yes.
But that's a really exciting part. Anna Chekovich from the Anti-Corruption Foundation, the opposition, Navalny's foundation, the opposition of Russia. She's been helping us lead this effort, and I think when we started it was completely different from what we're seeing now. And I do think like by 2030, like Bitcoin will be the default currency of activism. Like it's just becoming so clear now, and people are really open to this idea of how Bitcoin can be used outside of borders, and how you don't need ID to start, and they're just constantly blown away by this. So very, very, very bullish.
I love that. Arsh, I find these conversations to be so inspiring, and so I really appreciate you giving me some time to talk about this. I think the ideas that you guys are working through and, boots on the ground, having real world impact is quite inspiring. And I hope that people take your guys' message quite seriously and look at Bitcoin as maybe even a non-Bitcoiner and say, hey, maybe this isn't about just like number go up, get rich quick scheme, a bunch of tech bros hawking Bitcoin at you, or whatever people's impressions are. And that they realize that truly Bitcoin is a digital currency which is fighting for the poor and the impoverished, for the marginalized, for the Afghani young girl looking to educate herself, or for the young man in Venezuela trying to make change in his own regime. And I find that absolutely inspiring. Thanks so much for being with me here today.
Thank you for having me.